I'm 33 and I've been in sales for over 11 years now. And I look back at my 20s and I think, gosh, there are so many things that I wish I had known because it would have saved me years of trial and error. But if I were to go back and talk to my 20-year-old self, assuming he'd listen, which is definitely up for debate, here are the 33 cheat codes I would tell him. Number 1 here, zinc. And that might be a little bit of a wild one, and I'm putting it at number 1 because it has had a huge impact on me. And when I say zinc, I mean like the vitamin. Whenever I would feel a little bit sick, I would take zinc and it completely wipes out whatever cold I'm having. It has saved my quota a ton of times and has made me a fortune. I think a bottle of a zinc tablet is like $14, and the amount of money it's made me from squashing my sickness is uncountable. So if I were to go back, I would tell myself to start using zinc way earlier because I didn't learn about it until my late 20s. And gosh, that would have really saved some of the tougher quarters that I've had because I got sick. Number 2, don't implement everything that you learn. Early in my career, if I learned something, I was implementing it immediately. And I think that's overall a pretty good trait to have, but I stuck onto that for way too long. And in reality, you should be very thoughtful about what you choose to implement, and it should be something that solves a problem that you're experiencing. I found myself early in my career making a bunch of changes just for the sake of making changes because I've learned something new, instead of focusing on what are the actual blockers preventing me from hitting my number and implementing a solution to that blocker, not these larger solutions to solve giant problems that I wasn't even dealing with. For example, I used to change my cold call script quite a bit when I was an SDR. I didn't really struggle with big parts of the cold call. There were a few little areas that I needed to make a couple of tweaks. I didn't have to change the entire script. The third thing here is reverse engineer. When you're in sales, there's a lot of ups and downs. It can be a very emotional roller coaster. And one of the things that was helpful for me as I started progressing through my sales career is looking at the quota that I have and working backwards to how many daily activities I had to do in order to hit that quota. So you have your sales number, you back that into how many meetings you need to have, you back that into how many cold calls you have to make or cold emails you need to send in order to book that amount of meetings. So then that way you know on a daily basis what you have to do to be successful. A big part of my career was me just doing a ton of activity, hoping things were going to work out, when if I had had that kind of insight and I could work backwards and really figure out what activity was required to hit that number, there would have been a lot more clarity and I would have had a lot less anxiety. That's for sure. Number 4 here is be more intentional about relationships. Early in my career, I ignored a lot of people. I was not in a social mood. I was grinding, trying to be as successful as I possibly could. And that helped me in some ways, but it hurt me in others. The reality is, in any job that you have, the people around you are the most important component right after hitting the number that you're supposed to hit, of course. But those people are so important. You have no idea what companies they're gonna go to, where they're gonna get in their career, and having a good network of peers. I'll actually talk about that more later in one of the other cheat codes, but it's so critical to build these relationships. So early in your career especially, be social and keep in touch with people. Just because you don't work together anymore doesn't mean you can't get together. You can't have conversations with folks every now and then to keep a good relationship. Number 5, call at different times of the day. This goes for cold calls and for sales calls. And this is a very tactical one. Businesses tend to have rhythms. And if you find yourself calling, trying to get a hold of someone and they're not answering the phone or their gatekeeper won't let you through, and you just feel like you're running against this wall over and over and over again, try calling at wild times of the day, like early in the morning and late afternoon. It took me a while to figure out how effective this actually was. And I was blown away by how many CEOs or founders would be in the office when everyone else was at home, and all I had to do was call a little bit later. In fact, I actually used to call some people on my way home after work on the public transit bus, and then every now and then they'd answer. I'm like, shoot, it's super loud in here, and I'd have to like talk to them like this. So call at those wild times and you may see yourself getting through. Number 6 here is focus on the inputs way more than you focus on the outputs. There's this great book by legendary football coach Bill Walsh called The Score Takes Care of Itself. And he talks a lot about this concept of controlling what you can control. And it's such an important concept for you to understand and really implement. You want to make sure you're really focused on the activities that are leading indicators of you hitting the number you're supposed to hit. In sales, a lot of things can go wrong, and there's a lot we can't control. There's internal conversations at the companies we're selling to. There's just mismatches in personality. There's also initiatives that randomly change. There's a lot we can't control. I lost a deal once because there was a hurricane in Florida, right? Like all these things are possible. And because of that, if you always focus on the outcome, then you can be left in shambles because the outcome doesn't always happen in direct correlation to what you do. Instead, focus on all of the things you can control. Do the activities you need to do to hit your numbers. Send the best follow-up emails you possibly can. Make sure you do the best job you possibly can learning about what the prospect's challenges really are so you can position yourself as a true solution to the challenge. Focus on what you can control and let the quota work itself out. Number 7 here is don't make decisions from a place of scarcity. When you're having a tough month or tough quarter, it can feel really stressful because you're not getting to where you need to get to in order to hit your number. And because of that, we can tend to, as salespeople, get into a bit of a scarcity mindset.
We don't have enough, and we're trying to grab anything that we can.
And when we're in that mindset, we make the worst decisions imaginable. So what I would recommend to you is don't make any decisions when you have a scarcity mindset. So something like, I gotta quit this job, or this isn't the right fit for me. Those are not the right decisions to make when you're feeling like you're in a very scarce environment. Now, it could be the right decision. What I'd recommend doing is set a date where you will make that decision in the future. Just don't make that decision when you're in that moment of scarcity because you're not thinking clearly. You're gonna end up making a decision that you'll probably regret. Number 8 here is always follow up. There's a famous quote, the money is made in the follow-up. This is super true. You have to follow up, follow up, follow up. If somebody says that they're not interested, you gotta follow up with them because they might be interested in the future. If somebody says, reach out to me in a month, you gotta reach out to them a month. Call me next week at 2 o'clock on Thursday, call them next week, 2 o'clock at Thursday. It's so important that you follow up with people that you've started the conversation with. As a general rule, all things being equal, people buy from those that they know, like, and trust. So you having that follow-up relationship with them builds at least the know part, maybe the trust part, and hopefully the like part, depending on how charming you are. And you know me, I'm very charming, so everyone loves it when I follow up. That's the whole approach here, is you really want to follow up. And it's pretty simple. If you don't have anything to talk about, you got to find something. And it can be something simple like following up to ask another question. You can say, hey, last time we spoke, you mentioned this situation. That got me curious. Can you tell me a little bit about X? That can help you get the conversation started, and you can stay in that world of what are your problems, how can we help you solve those problems. Number 9 here is you gotta be hungry. I look back at my early 20s and I was very hungry. And that's actually something that I'm glad for because I wanted it so bad. Now, doesn't mean that you need all the stress and anxiety that comes along with that, but that hunger is really valuable. If you don't have aspirations to be somewhere, you have to solve that first. Where do you want to be? What do you want to achieve? When you have that as a North Star, then you can align all of your efforts towards it, which gives you a lot of focus. Number 10 here is be a yes man. I look back at my early 20s and I said yes to everything. And there's a lot of folks who suggest not to do that. They say, hey, you should say no to most things, protect your time. And I think you earn the right to do that. Early in your career, you should say yes to everything. I did, and I'm very glad I did because it put me in positions to move through my career much faster than I would have if I was much more protective of my time. That being said, we shouldn't be all stressed out and overworked, but we can say yes to a lot of things to experience different things, which will lead our career down a direction that maybe we weren't even expecting. Number 11, never stop learning. Early in my career, I would go through spurts where I would read a ton, learn a ton, and then I would take a couple months of a break. And then I would read a ton, learn a ton, and then I'd take a few more months as a break. And I wish I had been a lot more consistent earlier in my career. I was just so stressed out about stuff that usually reading at night would fall down the wayside. But you don't want that to happen because those skills start compounding. And I've talked about this in other videos before. It's not necessarily what you read, it's the timing that you read it. So having that consistent rhythm of reading books gives you a higher opportunity of reading a book at the right time, which has really big impacts. Number 12 here is pick the right partner. I did this one very well, so learn from me. You gotta pick the right partner. Who you're dating has a big impact on the success that you have. It is way harder to be successful in your career when the person that you're with is an absolute headache. So make sure you take that relationship very seriously and don't tolerate a bunch of drama, because the biggest hack early in your career is a drama-free relationship. So be selective on who you choose to spend your time with. Number 13, become very obsessed over the people that you sell to. You really need to understand their world and dive deep into their universe so that way you understand the challenges that they face, whether you can solve them or not, all of their challenges, how their days are, what operating framework they use when they interact with other people at the office and they do their job. Like, these are the things that you really need to deeply understand. Just because you didn't have that role doesn't mean you can't understand that role. And early in my career, I really wish I spent a lot more time with the people that I sold to, not to sell them, just to learn about their world, because it has a dramatic impact on how effectively you can communicate with those people, which ultimately dictates what your close rate is. Which leads me to number 14. Try and stick to one industry. I did not do this early in my career, and I really wish that I did. You having years of experience in a specific industry when it comes to selling, and I imagine other roles too, but especially for selling, has a big impact, because over those years you build a network, you learn their world even better. You have both a broader experience with that industry and a deeper experience with that industry, and your income will be a reflection of that expertise. The salespeople that I know that are doing the best, and I know several that make over $1 million a year in commission, those people are in one industry. It's a very complex industry. They have deep expertise in that industry. They've been doing it for their entire careers. They have strong networks, and they make a lot of money because of it, both in salary and commission. So if you're early in your career, I highly recommend find one industry and really stick to it. Number 15 here is set smaller goals. I was a big goal setter, both in terms that I like goal setting and I would set really big goals, and I think they're useful. So I'm not telling you not to set big goals. You should goal set and you should dream big, 10x your goals. I love this kind of philosophy. But there is a benefit to setting smaller goals that are very attainable. Because sales has a lot of ups and downs, we can find ourselves in positions where the big goal that we had set seems really out of reach. And at the end of the day, you're setting big goals, not because you're 100% guaranteed to hit the larger goal, but generally because where you end up is higher than the smaller goal that you would have set. That's why you want to 10x your goals. And then you might actually hit the 10x goal, which is great. But by setting those smaller goals, you can start building that momentum, which feels good, which keeps you on the right path to the larger goals. I've seen a lot of reps, both as a colleague when I was selling, but also as a leader running teams, where they get really demotivated once the gap between where they are and the goal that they had set becomes incredibly large. So having those smaller goals are really helpful for that. Which leads me to number 16 here. Never stop building momentum. For example, if you stop cold calling for 1 month because you're so busy working deals, the next month you're gonna have no deals to work, and you're gonna have to cold call to try to book a bunch of deals. You're gonna have a tough month, and then the month after that you're gonna have a bunch of deals to work, and you're not gonna cold call, and then you're gonna have some months that are good, some months that aren't good. It's a total mess. You don't want to keep resetting your momentum, so keep riding momentum as you get it. So if you're in a situation where you have to do outreach to book your own appointments and then you have to close those appointments, set an amount of calls, emails, whatever activities you do to book those appointments, set an amount of that you do every single day no matter what, and keep that consistency going. What you'll find, especially as you're building up your follow-up list, you're gonna find that that builds over time. Number 17 here is do stuff for fun. Work really hard and feel very light. This is something that I really didn't do when I was younger, and I look back on, I think was a big mistake. I had so much intensity to hit the numbers that I wanted to hit, to achieve what I wanted to achieve in my career, and that drive was really useful. And I used to think that that feeling of anxiety, the concern of not hitting my number, the worry, I felt like that was a requirement. It's not. Do things for fun outside of the work. As I started progressing through my career, I started opening myself up to doing more things that brought me joy. It made me feel a lot lighter because I was doing stuff that I enjoyed outside of just the work, which made me perform a lot better at work because it wasn't like I was under this stress 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So do things for fun. Whether it's a physical activity or a social activity, do things for fun. Which leads me to number 18 here. Work-life balance is a myth. It doesn't exist. There's no personal life, there's no work life, there's just life. It's completely integrated. If things aren't going very well at work, your home life suffers. If your home life is really chaotic and not going all that well, your work suffers. It's so integrated. And what people have tried to do is separate those to where you have this work-life balance. It doesn't work that way. There's too much overlap. And if you were to think in the mindset of, I need to integrate my work and my life, you're gonna find that you have more balance. It's not balance, it's integration. They are all one. And by treating it that way, you're gonna feel much more whole life, and you're gonna feel a lot more flexibility to go into work, go into personal life, wherever you're at and whenever you need to. For example, I have 3 kids, and sometimes I'm working late at night. Sometimes I'm working all through the day and I don't do anything at night. Sometimes I have to leave at noon. But before, when I'm thinking about this balance, I'm all concerned about my career. Every time I would leave work to go do life, I would feel guilty because I'm not doing the work side, and then vice versa, right? I'm working and I'm not doing the life side because I'm trying to strive for balance. There's no balance, it's integrated, and you should feel okay to be prioritizing either one, because there is no difference. It's a false choice. And if you make decisions with the lens of work-life balance, you'll find yourself not in the right place, at least in my experience. Number 19 here is maintain relationships with customers that you've sold to. Early in my career, if I closed a deal, I handed it off to customer success and I was done with it. I never spoke to the people again. As I started growing in my career, I started keeping more relationships with past customers, and they've become a great source of referrals, of course, and you could maybe sell them stuff in the future, sure, but the real reason why is because they're great people to have relationships with. Not because you get anything out of it, but because you guys built a bond or a relationship through the sales process. These are great people to be around. You speak the same language as each other. You can be very helpful to them. They can be very helpful to you. So it's great from a relationship perspective, not just from a business perspective, but it is nice that it will help your career having good relationships with people that you've sold to, especially if you follow the earlier cheat code where you stick into one industry. Number 20 here is track metrics. It took me way too long to realize how important math is for the sales process. What you want to do here is understand what your conversion rates are across every step of the sales process. When you're doing your cold calls or your cold outreach, when you're booking meetings, from deal stage 1 in your pipeline to deal stage 2 and so on. You really want to know your numbers, because when you know your numbers, then you can identify the gaps. Where are you actually struggling? Is it later in the sales process? Is it earlier? And when you know that, you can then ask whoever is in your network that is very good at that one part. So if you're struggling getting people to actually sign the agreement at the very end, and you just feel like a lot of deals get to the very end and they don't sign, you can go and find the person at your company or a friend of yours who is the best at getting people to sign, learn their process and implement it. It'll make you learn so much faster because you can be very specific on what challenge you need to overcome and implement a solution to that challenge. That leads me to number 21. Sales is a lot more about understanding than it is convincing. Earlier in my career, I started selling gym memberships. It was very much convince. And as I've grown in my career and I've sold different products and services and the deal sizes have gotten a lot larger, I've really learned that it's about understanding the person. And I look back at when I was selling gym memberships, and I feel like if I spent a little bit more time really understanding the people who were coming in and what they were really looking for, then I would have done a lot better in that industry instead of always trying to convince everybody. You're not trying to sell to everybody. You're trying to understand the individual that you're selling to and what challenges they're having so you can properly sell a solution that solves that challenge. That's at the core what you're trying to do. By better understanding them, you're going to be able to better sell them the right thing. Number 22 here is prioritize family. When I was first really coming up in my career, I had my first leadership role. I had my daughter, my firstborn, and I went to work 4 days after she was born. And I didn't have to. I was on paternity leave. I could have taken a month off, but my team all of a sudden started struggling because I was gone, and my boss didn't do a great job of keeping their performance where they needed to be. So I went back to lead the team again after 4 days. And I look back on on that, and I feel like I didn't need to. I could have taken the paternity leave. I could have spent a lot more time with my daughter when she was first born. I've had 3 kids. I didn't make that mistake again. All of them are great. I have great relationships with all of them. But I often think, gosh, I really let my own anxiety, my own worry get the best of me there. So if you're early in your career and you're building a family, definitely prioritize family. It's gonna help you out in the long term. Number 23 here is don't be a bull in a china shop. Early in my career, I was very aggressive. And with that, you might be noticing a theme here. I had a lot of stress and anxiety, and I was this bull in a china shop trying to make anything happen by any means necessary. And it was a lot. What I've since learned is that you can work really hard without feeling like you're working really hard. And it took me a real long time to learn that. Number 24 here, change your environment. If you're feeling stuck, like you're doing the same thing over and over again, you keep hitting the same wall over and over and over again, take a breath, take a step back, grab your laptop and go to a different location. This is a very simple one. Go work outside, go work at a coffee shop. Leave your house. If you work from home, go somewhere to like a co-working space. If you're at an office, work from home for a day. Changing your environment has a big impact, especially when you're stuck in this rhythm and you feel like you're not making the progress you are trying to make. One of the things that I do is I'll take a full day where I'll go get an Airbnb over on the beach or in the mountains, and I'll work from there for the full day. And it's often my most productive work because I'm completely out of the environment that I'm comfortable in. Which brings me to number 25, do things that make you feel uncomfortable. Throughout your sales career, you're gonna have the highs, you're gonna have the lows. You're gonna be in situations where you feel very uncomfortable. You need to become comfortable being uncomfortable. So by purposely doing things that get yourself out of your comfort zone, when you encounter being outside of your comfort zone in your career and your real life, you're gonna be much more comfortable because you're the type of person who has thrived in these kind of uncomfortable situations. And here's number 26, prioritize your health. I did not do this early in my career, and here's the reality, and I'll speak candidly. You're gonna either have to handle it at some point and lose a bunch of weight, or you're just gonna die early. So if you don't wanna die early, then you should probably prioritize your health throughout your career so you don't end up in a situation where you're dramatically overweight, barely able to use your body, and you have to figure out how to lose all of that weight or just let yourself go into oblivion, which no one should do. So in my career, I totally ignored my weight completely, and I just gained weight. And as of recording this, I've lost 60 pounds over the past 5 months, and I feel awesome. And I'm gonna continue on that path, and I will lose all of the weight. But it would have been way easier if I just prioritized my health the entire time and didn't let myself get out of control. So I highly recommend prioritizing your health throughout your career. And it's not for like, oh, you're gonna perform better because you have more energy or anything like that. I always had great energy. I was always really upbeat, excited. I had a ton of energy for work. I did really well in my career. So I'm not one of those people that buys into that relationship for everybody. I think for some people, it's definitely true. The healthier they are, the better they'll perform in other places. But I feel like I performed fine. It's really because you're going to have to do it anyway. And it's way easier to do it while you're in your career than having to go all intense at one point to try to lose a bunch of weight because you've racked it on over a decade. Number 27 here is journaling. And this one's a bit cliche. I know, I get it. And I'm not saying you should journal every single day. It's great if you do, right? I do encourage you to if you can build that habit. I've always struggled building that habit, but there were times where I was in real critical moments that I actually journaled and wrote down how I was feeling and what I was going through. And I look back at those and it really changes my perspective. I look back on some things that I don't even remember anymore. Like I was reading a journal entry from like 7 years ago. And I was all concerned about some situation at a company I was working at. I led a team and I was concerned about one of my bosses. I'm like, what was this? I don't even remember this happening, but it was all encompassing at that point. It's all I could think about. And I was very concerned about it when I was writing. So I'm glad I have that because I can look back on things and say, wow, this is what I was going through. Look at where I'm at now. And that contrast is really powerful because sometimes we forget how much we've actually changed, right? So having those little touch points is really helpful. So I recommend journaling every now and then or every day if you can. 28, keep a clean CRM. Now, you're probably like rolling your eyes thinking like, yeah, my manager tells me to do this all the time. I lost a deal because I was not very organized with my CRM. And ever since then, I took the CRM very, very seriously. And I feel like a lot of salespeople either have not had that situation where they lost a deal because they weren't managing their pipeline properly. And then when they do, they'll snap into gear and then they start managing it really well. Or they're sales rep who are naturally pretty organized and they keep things clean. I did not. Early in my career, my CRM was a mess. And because of that, I ended up losing a deal. It was like a $30,000 deal because I didn't put them in the right place and I'd forgotten about them because I was doing so many demos and I lost a pretty big deal. I reached out to them like a month later. They'd went with a competitor. It was super embarrassing. So because of that, I decided to move my seat, my desk, this was in office, next to the most organized person on the sales team. And I just copied his processes. His name's Tom. I copied his processes and then used it. And I kept the ones that worked really well for me and I stopped doing the ones that were a little extreme. Like he would color code his notes and stuff. That's a lot for me. But how he was managing his pipeline was really effective. How I would time block my day because he showed me how he time blocked his day. These types of things helped a lot and it prevented deals from slipping through the cracks, which made me a lot better salesperson. Number 29, appreciate the journey. In sales, we're so focused on outcomes, hit the quota, make more money, get promoted. Like there's all these outcomes we're always trying to hit. But we forget the journey it takes to get there. And the reality is there's a lot of fun in the journey. Like I didn't fully appreciate how much fun I had being an SDR just cold calling. I mean, I was in a room full of 30 people. We were all in cubicles. I think there's a total of 90 SDRs and I was in one vertical, we had 30-ish, something like that. And we were all cold calling together. We were laughing, joking around. I look back at that experience. I see pictures from back then and I smile and I remember these memories. I mean, I remember grabbing a couple of SDRs and our manager and doing a foot race in the back of the office to see who was faster. Like just goofy, fun stuff that at the time I didn't fully appreciate because I was so focused on hitting my number. But I look back on it, it brings me a lot of joy. So appreciate the moment. And no matter how stressful it gets, if you can step out of that stress and just look at where you are and appreciate where you are, I think you're gonna find a lot more happiness throughout your sales career. Number 30 here, pick something and do it. There are so many different tactics and strategies that you can use to book meetings, close deals. It's crazy how many things are out there. They all kind of work. I've built over 70 B2B sales teams, and it's rare that I go into a company and I find that they're using some tactic that's just completely goofy and doesn't make any sense. They all kind of work. There might be one that works the best for you, but even the one that doesn't work best for you still works. What you want to do is pick one thing, stick to it, and do it over and over and over again. You can refine it later, but if you keep changing the approach, have a flavor of the month training or tactic or approach to doing your outreach, whatever it is, if you keep changing it, you're gonna get nowhere. So pick one approach, one methodology, and just stick to it, then refine it over time. Number 31 here is manage up. This is really important and nobody tells you about this until you go to like a larger company in leadership. You have to manage up. You have a boss. You need to manage the relationship with that boss just like that boss manages you. Optics really matter. How you're perceived really matters. And we act like it doesn't, it 100% does. So make sure that you're managing up. So for example, I'll tell you a funny story and then I'll kind of give you the quick bullets of what to focus on here. But I have a friend of mine who's really high up at a company, kind of a legacy company. He's been there for a real long time. And he was working, like really growing through his career before you could schedule emails to go out. He used to set his alarm for 11:30 p.m. every night to wake him up so he can send a bunch of emails that he would write as drafts just so people thought he was up at 11:30 at night working. Now, you think about that, like that's crazy, right? But the optics do matter and people do notice that. So a couple of things to think about here. If you come into work early or if you leave work late, make sure you're seen. Make sure people know that you're putting in that effort. If they don't see it, they won't know it's happening. So you want to make sure that you're being seen when you do these things. And then also, if your manager or your boss gives you feedback, implement the feedback and report back to them how it's working. Show them that you are doing the work, that you're coachable, that you're implementing what they're giving you. Those types of optics have a really big impact on how you're perceived, not only by that one person, by everybody else, because that one person is going to talk to their boss and the other leaders. It's really important to have good optics and manage up and over communicate with your boss and your managers so everyone is on the same page. You never want a situation where people think that you're not doing that much just because you're simply not as visible as you should be. Number 32 is find a mentor. Early in my career, I didn't have a strong mentor. And then as I started getting older, I did, and I built a network of mentors. I have a great framework for finding mentors of people who are a lot further ahead of you. You'll learn a ton by having people who've been where you are and got through it and have become very successful. So here's what I do to build relationships with mentors. The first thing is I ask for their advice. So if there's someone a lot further ahead of me, I'll ask them for their advice. I don't need to meet with them. I'll shoot them an email. I'll cold message them on LinkedIn. If we're in person, I'll ask their feedback on something, but I just ask them for advice on something that I'm struggling with. The second thing I do is implement their advice. This is the part where everyone fails. Actually do what they told you to do. And then here's the secret sauce. You follow up with them. You go, hey, I asked you advice on X. You told me to do Y. Here's the result I got from implementing what you told me. This will get that person so excited because people who are further along in their career, who are more in that mentor stage of their life, they love giving people feedback. They hate people not executing on their feedback. So by you closing the loop and saying, I did what you told me and it worked, they're gonna be more likely to invest in you, and then you can build really strong relationships with these people who are a lot further in your career, which is going to accelerate your growth by quite a bit. And at number 33 here, find a peer group. So mentors are the people that are ahead of you. Peer groups are the people who are next to you at the same point, or maybe a little further ahead or a little further behind, about the same point in your career. You're gonna learn a ton from peers, just like you learn a lot from mentors. I have a couple peer groups that I'm in where we all have businesses around the same size and we grow together. And the beauty is you might be dealing with something that they just dealt with a year ago, 6 months ago. So they can give you feedback, and it's really tactical and it's really current. Mentors are incredibly valuable, so I don't want to take away from the value of mentors, but sometimes they don't fully remember this tactical component of what they did when they were in your shoes, or the timing or whatever the situation was so different that it's not directly applicable. A lot of times it is, sometimes it's not. Peer groups fill that gap and you're growing together. It's very motivating. It's good to build strong relationships with people that are at similar points in their career so you guys can all grow together. So these are 33 sales tactics that I know at 33 that I wish I knew in my 20s. And if you want to see a video on how I closed $56,000 in deals in 7 days, click here and I'll see you there.